Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out at the range to take a look at 4 different piston-driven AR15's and 5.56. These are my 4 favorite piston-driven guns. But before we get started with today's video, guys, if you enjoy the content that we produce here at the Military Arms channel, please take a moment to join our Patreon family. There is a link in the video description below. You'll get early access to videos like this one. You'll have direct access to me. I answer all private communications, and we have some other perks as well. So please follow that link. With all that being said, let's get started with today's video. Over the years, you guys have seen me use a lot of primary arms optics, everything from red dot sights to magnified optics. And why do I do that? Well, over the years, they've offered very good products for a very fair price. They have fast shipping, outstanding customer support, and that's why you've seen me using those products for so many years. If you guys would like to pick up a magnified optic like you see on this Daniel Defense Mark 12, you can pick up an optic like this one. Just put it in your cart over at pa.com or primaryarms.com. And if you use the code MAC at checkout, MAC at checkout, you'll get a free scope mount with your optic, and that goes for any Primary Arms branded optic. If you pick up an optic that has an integrated mount, use that code MAC at checkout, and you'll get a free Kill Flash ARD for that optic. So please swing by and check out primaryarms.com. Before we get too deep into today's video, I do want to talk about gas piston AR-15s. If you follow the channel, you'll know I'm not necessarily a fan of gas pistons on AR-15s. I'm a direct gas impingement / internal piston type of guy. With that being said, I recognize that there are some good designs out there, and many of the problems that the early gas piston guns suffered from were resolved long ago. And the rifles I'm going to show you today are piston guns that I think are sound in design, and I think that they are worth taking a look at if you want a gun with a piston on it for some reason. With that being said, let's start off with the Colt piston carbine. Sadly, this rifle's no longer made. CZ has purchased Colt. I hope that CZ goes back into Colt's old product catalog and takes a look at some of the stuff that they once sold and brings back products like this, because this is probably one of the better gas piston ARs that I've seen out there on the market. And there are a few things that make it a little bit different. There's the gas piston itself, and then there's the monolithic upper, which is very reminiscent of LMT's monolithic upper, and there may have been some licensing issues going on there. I don't know, so I'm not going to speak to that, but you will see a similarity between this gun and the LMT uppers. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take the gun apart here really quick. So on the bottom half of the gun, it's pretty much standard AR-15 / M4 carbine fare. All right. You can see piston carbine is etched into the side of the mag well. It has a stock on it that has the ability to lock, so you get it into the position you want and flip this lever up. It just takes some of the slop out of it. But again, standard AR-15 lower otherwise. Here we have the monolithic upper. Take the bolt and carrier and T-handle out here for you guys really quick. On the bottom side, there's a panel here that you can take off to use a special wrench to get to the barrel nut if you want to take the barrel off. And then the gas piston itself is contained right here in the gas block on the end of the barrel. And it's really surprisingly simple to take apart as compared to some other designs out there. There's just a simple pin that you push out as you're looking down that way. It goes left to right only. The pin's captive, so it stops. And when you release that pin, you can see that it has this floating head piston design on it. And this is your gas piston. Extremely simple. The carrier on the gun has been modified, obviously, because it doesn't use direct gas impingement. So now you just have a place here that's machined into the carrier itself for the piston to operate against. Inside of the bolt carrier, it's all standard AR-15 components, standard bolt, extractor, cam pin, firing pin, cotter pin, all that standard, and it doesn't require me showing it to you. So that's really simple to take it apart. To put it back together again, you just drop the gas piston in, wiggle it around until it aligns. Then there'll be a little cut right there on the gas piston. And you want to make sure that's facing up, because that's where the pin's going to grab it. Push that pin back across, and you've reassembled your gas system. Extremely simple and robust. The guns are really reliable, and just in general, it handles and feels really well, really solid. And despite the fact that it is a monolithic upper with quad rails going all the way around, it's not really heavy as you would think it might be just by looking at it. So definitely the piston carbine is high on my list of gas piston ARs that I like. Now, the PWS that I have in front of me now, this is the Mark 116 Mod 2M. This gun is interesting because I have this love-hate relationship with it. I really like the design mostly because of all the piston rifles, ARs that I've fired over the years. This one is the most smooth in terms of its recoil impulse, and that likely has to do with the fact that this is a long stroke gas piston. When I say long stroke, that means the piston is attached directly to the carrier, and the piston travels the full length of the stroke of the bolt and carrier when it cycles, much like an AK-47, if you will. The other guns that we have out here today are short stroke gas piston guns. Now, what I didn't mention on the Colt piston carbine is that it's a self-regulating gas system. In other words, it has one setting. On this PWS, we have multiple gas settings that the user can address up here. I think there's 3 or 4 different gas settings, and you use the tip of a bullet to make adjustments to it. When you run the gun, because the rail goes out over the gas system, when you run the gun and fire it like this, you'll get your hands covered in black carbon because it is venting gas right there, but it won't burn you. But what really drives me nuts about this gun is the effort that's required to take it apart. I have never quite mastered it, but I love shooting the gun. And you'll see me using it every once in a while. It'll pop up on the channel when we were talking about this new LPVO in a previous video from Primary Arms, the PLX Compact that you see here. It was on this rifle. I really enjoy shooting this rifle. This one also has a K-can on it from OSS and 5.56, which is a low back pressure can. Anyway, taking this thing apart, what makes it different from the other guns out here today is this. So the bottom half, standard AR-15 fair, 2 pins, pops off, and there you go. Has some ambi controls there. It's a really nice lower. I mean, the ergonomics and where the buttons are, everything on the PWS lower are just spot on. But this is where things get a little bit weird. So to take it apart, you pull the T-handle back, you pull the bolt and carrier back, then you got to pull them back together, lift up. That was the smoothest I've ever done it. And now you'll see that the T-handle is connected to this long piston. This is the long stroke gas piston. It's a miniature AK-47 piston, if you will. But to get the T-handle off, you have to take the piston off the end of the rod, and then you can slide it apart, and then it'll come apart like a standard AR-15. Pull the cotter pin out, take the firing pin out, take the cam pin out, and it's a standard AR-15 type bolt in there. But it is on a spring. It doesn't have piston rings or anything like that. But yeah, so that is what makes this gun so cool. Now again, because of this design, it really is the smoothest shooting gas piston AR I've ever fired. And it's just hard to believe that, and I think PWS kind of markets it this way too, and I think they're just in doing so. It really does make a difference having this piston out here in terms of how the piston affects the carrier, how it travels rearward, the velocity at which it travels rearward. Just that extra mass being out in front of the bolt carrier group, it just seems to actually change the whole dynamic of that recoil impulse. Put it back together. You slide this on, pop that on. Putting it back together, I've never truly mastered, but let's give it a try here. Line the gas piston up, T-handle. Oh my goodness. Guys, I'm becoming a master of this. Okay, I'm really starting to like it now. All right, so there it is back together. Now you'll notice it wants to spring away from the bolt face. That's because it does have a spring in there on the bolt itself in the carrier group. Pin the bottom half back on, close her up, and then running it is pretty much standard AR-15. But if you've never fired one of these PWS rifles, I highly recommend trying one out. If you're at a class or something and somebody's running one, check it out. Now, I have heard some issues regarding quality control with these rifles. I've not run into that problem. Jason is the one that turned me on to these rifles. He had one years ago that prompted me to pick this one up. And yeah, I've had really, really good luck with this thing. And I think it looks really cool. The ribbing and stuff on the receiver, it just has its own look to it. But certainly where it shines is in terms of where it counts, and that's in shooting the gun. I know there are a ton of holster options out there, but hear me out. You really should check out Vetter holsters. I'll put a link in the video description below. I'm currently wearing a Vetter holster, and I have my Dan Wesson 10mm Specialist in it. They're handcrafted right here in the United States. Of course, they're a Kydex holster. They do have an adjustable tension screw. The holsters typically have about a 2 to 3 day turnaround time on custom orders, which is really pretty darn fast. They're highly rated. Their customer reviews on their website and on places like Amazon.com are really positive. And they also make belts. I have a black Vetter holster belt on with the holster that I just showed you guys. This is another version of the belt. This one's in light gray. It has a Cobra buckle. Very rigid belt, so it's going to act well as a gun belt. It's not going to collapse on you like some thin leather belts would do. Again, handcrafted, great quality. I'll put a link to Vetter holsters in the video description below. The next rifle I want to show you guys is from LWRC. They've built their entire brand around being a gas piston AR-15 company. Years ago at SHOT Show, I went up to their booth, and at the time all they offered were gas piston rifles. And I said, "Are you guys ever going to do a DI gun?" And they said, "No, probably not, because we've built our brand around our gas piston guns." And they had. But then years later, they brought a DI gun to market, and it actually shoots really nice, and it's a fraction of the cost of their gas piston guns. You can pick one up for right around $1,500 new. So it's really a cool alternative. But if you're looking for a gas piston gun, LWRC is definitely one of the reigning champs out there in terms of really solidly built guns that are well vetted, well tested, and run really, really well. Now, this is the 6.8, which means it's chambered in 6.8 SPC, and this uses proprietary Magpul magazines, which are slightly longer than your standard AR-15 5.56 magazine. The receiver is slightly larger, magazines are slightly larger to accommodate the 6.8 more comfortably. You can fit a 6.8 into a standard AR-15 upper and lower, though. But LWRC saw an opportunity there to build a dedicated rifle. But what's the same is the gas piston system on this rifle that is common across all the different cartridges they offer firearms chambered in. To take the top half off, now it's a monolithic rail, but unlike the Colt where the bottom half comes off to access the barrel, with the LWRC, the top half comes off and the bottom part is monolithic with the upper. So unscrew these little screws out here in the front, and then this can kind of lift up. You have to go quite a ways out because I have a scope on it that's fairly low mounted. Kind of lift it up, slide it out, and that's how you access your gas piston. Now you can see how the gas piston works on the gun. Has an adjustable gas block. And if you take a look on the inside, now LWRC also does really nice ambi lowers. So you'll have a paddle, ping pong paddle on this side for a bolt stop, bolt release. You have ambi mag release that's on the opposite side. They really make a nice ambi lower. But to take the bolt carrier out, just pop the T-handle back, and you'll notice on this bolt carrier, it looks an awful lot like the Colt in design, or I should say the Colt looks an awful lot like this one. The interface for the gas piston is machined into the bolt carrier itself, so it's not bolted on. And it's really, really robust. It's an incredibly robust system. Now, one thing you'll note is that while this does have an adjustable gas system on it, I run OSS cans on my AR-15s and other gas guns, and there's a reason for that. If you're running a DI gun, for example, that isn't something that you can just turn a valve on and regulate the gas unless you add it later, you want to get rid of that back pressure that a traditional baffled can creates. And OSS does not overgas your rifle. So if you have a standard AR-15 and you don't want to take the gas block off, or you don't want to put a heavier recoil spring or heavier buffer in it, or buy an adjustable bolt carrier group, you just want to put a suppressor on your gun and run it without overgassing it, check out OSS. They just recently changed their name to Hulux or something like that. They'll forever be known as OSS to me. But they're really, really good for gas piston guns, and especially direct gas impingement guns, where you have to start changing components out if you want to regulate them for use with a suppressor. Not necessary with that OSS. So overall, really, really cool gun. Great ambi controls, extremely high quality, and certainly one of the better gas piston designs out there on the market. The final gun that I want to show you in today's video is the HK MR556A1, which is the super civilian version of the HK416, which is in use by military forces all over the globe, including our own U.S. military. And again, when it comes to the Germans, the quality just typically goes to the roof. All the guns I've shown you this afternoon have really, really good quality, really robust gas systems in it, and the MR556A1 is no different. Now, I would rather have an actual 416 that was semi-automatic, but HK has this policy of not selling military weapons to civilians, so they have to super civilianize everything that they offer. But despite that, this is still a very capable rifle. It has a great gas system in it. It's probably the punchier of all the guns out here. By punchy, I mean when the gun fires, that initial recoil impulse. This thing seems it's purposely a little bit overgassed on the 416/MR 5.56, but it is really known for its reliability. And so that's why you see all the world's militaries taking a look at this rifle. What's interesting is the M16, of course, was adopted by the U.S. military in the mid-1960s. And people used to pick on it 20 years ago saying, well, the M16's just kind of a joke. It's a poodle killer. It's direct gas impingement. It poops where it eats. It's just a bad design. Well, what's funny is the M16 is the second most popular weapon in the world in terms of military small arms and infantry rifles, the #1 slot going to the AK-47 and all of its variants. So it's interesting to see how this rifle has gained so much traction in military circles, and it certainly speaks to the quality of the HK design. Now, this one, being super civilianized, it has to be a pain in the butt to take apart. So it has a little tool that's actually, the tool's in the stock here if you want to use it. I always grab a punch so I don't lose the tool by misplacing it. But what the tool does is allows you to push the center of the pin and then push it across. It locks the pin in there for some reason. I guess they don't want you, it's a military feature, being able to quickly hinge your gun open to clear dirt from the action or something. I don't know. I'll never understand HK's motives sometimes. But here you can see the design of the gun, some extra safety features that are built into the bolt carrier. And there's the interface for the gas piston rod that's underneath the handguard. And you'll notice that most of these have some sort of a taper back here on the end of the bolt carrier group, and that's so when it gets hit up here, the fulcrum is somewhere around here on the gas or on the bolt carrier group. So when it takes a hit up here, it's naturally going to want to rock down, pivot on that fulcrum, and they bevel this area here so it'll line up with the recoil spring and buffer tube without banging up the rear of the receiver. That's one of the developments that came out of trying to resolve the problems with the early gas piston AR15's, was that carrier tilt issue. But yeah, very simple gun to maintain, very robust, and again, easily one of the best gas piston guns out there, and also one of the most expensive. They have updated the design recently, or fairly recently, and they now have M-LOK rails and stuff like that versus the quad rails that this rifle has. But they're still kind of a pain in the rear end to take apart and put back together. You kind of have to get that pin started, and then you have to put the tool in there, push the pin the opposite direction of putting it back together. It's kind of counterintuitive, but you'll see that HK drives me nuts with this stuff, guys. I just hate that design. But anyway, there you go. That's how you put her back together. But overall, a little bit heavy, a little bit porky. There are some issues with magazine compatibility that folks have noticed out there with at least this version. I haven't tried the newer version of the guns. I don't know if they changed that. But it just has a really hefty, chunky feel to it. A lot of surface area on the butt plate. But despite all that and its weight, when the gun first fires, it just gives you that initial jolt, and you can tell it's a gas piston gun. It doesn't have that smooth acceleration like a DI gun does, or the PWS rifle being the smoothest of all the gas piston guns out here this afternoon. I hadn't originally planned on doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I have to pick which one of these four rifles is my favorite, but I have two different categories. From a collector's standpoint and just the cool history behind it, I would definitely take the Colt Piston Carbine. Sadly, the gun's no longer in production. I hope CZ remedies that and brings the gun back. But if they don't, that'd be a true shame, because this is probably the coolest of all the guns out here, simply because it's interesting to see where an actual defense contractor, Colt, was going with a piston design. Perhaps they were trying to pitch it to special operations or the military community. I don't know, maybe overseas sales, something like that. Chris over Small Arms Solutions could probably speak more to it. I know he's also fond of these particular rifles. But in terms of shooting, the best gun on the table is definitely, for me, the PWS. And I say that because of all the guns here, it's definitely the smoothest. It's, in current production, so if you break a part, you can get replacement parts. It's surprisingly lightweight, handy, and again, you just can't beat that recoil impulse or the lack thereof. This is one of the flattest shooting guns out there, the only other gun out there that shoots quite like this one in terms of how it feels, how steady it is when it's firing, would be the Sig Virtus, which is why I'm such a Sig Virtus fan. But the PWS, definitely of the four here, would be my top pick for one, just based upon its shooting capabilities and prowess. So anyway, comment down below, which of these four would you pick if you could only pick one of the four? I look forward to your comments. Guys, if you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best way to do that is to become part of our Patreon family. There is a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, you've got that little join button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Mash that join button and support us here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. And last but not least, guys, please swing by and check out coppercustom.com. Thank you for 14 years of support, and we'll talk to you guys soon.